is up? It's the Pro Football Focus Fantasy Podcast. My name is Jeff Ratcliffe, and it's Wednesday, May 13th. The NFL extending their virtual offseason here basically to the end of the month. I guess technically speaking, it is until May 29th, but I expected this to happen. It's probably going to run through everything, at least the entire offseason program calendar, which goes to June 26th, so it is what it is. No big deal there, but does look like, and I'm going to cross my fingers on this one, things still seem to be slightly trending in the right direction. Let's hope there's football, baby. Let's hope there's football. But it looks like we may get some other sports first, so regardless, that's good. But on the show today, I want to talk a little wide receiver strength of schedule. Talked running backs on the show yesterday, and it's been all running backs all week so far. But today, breaking down these wide receivers, one of the most popular features that we have at PFF is the wide receiver cornerback matchup chart. And really, this strength of schedule is sort of like a season-long version of that. It doesn't break it down on the micro level like wide receiver cornerback does, but really, that's the only factor we're accounting for here is cornerback coverage in terms of breaking down these matchups. So if you missed yesterday's pod, the basic idea is pretty simple. What we're doing is we're accounting for the current roster. So, for example, Minnesota, Xavier Rhodes isn't there any longer, right? So if you're looking at last year's fantasy strength of schedule numbers or the numbers based on last year's data, well, you can't really do that, right? Because Xavier Rhodes isn't there anymore for Minnesota. It doesn't tell you what the matchup is going to be. So instead, we're using the current quarterback grades for the Minnesota Vikings in coverage to gauge the matchup, against that team. And in case you are wondering, that, of course, is Mike Hughes, Holton Hill, and the first-rounder Jeff Gladney. He went 31st overall in this year's draft out of TCU. So that's their current starting three. Now, it is a little challenging with rookie corners coming in or any rookie player. What grade do you use? Because you can't just use their college grade. So what we've done is we've actually backtracked and tested the correlation between college grade and pro grade, at least in their rookie season. So we do have a little formula we use there to establish what the projected grade will be. So it's not perfect by any means. But, spoiler alert, the better you are in college, the better you are in your rookie year in most instances. But rookie corners tend to get picked on a little bit. But we will see guys who, early in their rookie season may struggle, but then they can come on. There's a learning curve across the board in the NFL, but especially when you're talking about, cornerback in particular. So I think of a guy like Sean Murphy Bunting last year, where early in the season was really getting picked on, but as the season wore on, he really started to show up. And remember, he was a fairly premium pick, 39th overall in the 2019 draft. So just because you struggle out of the gate doesn't mean you're going to struggle the entire season. So anyway, long story short, wanted to take a look at the best and worst schedules based on these matchups using the current depth charts. And we'll, just like we did with running backs, we'll start with the good and then we'll work our way to the bad. The best schedule, and I think I already did mention this last week, but bears repeating, goes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Part of this is just simply playing against the NFC South. I would say not playing themselves is a benefit, because if you're going to say who has the best secondary, maybe it is Tampa in the NFC South right now. I think that's a fair argument. Don't sleep on the Tampa defense. Surprisingly, a little bit better than a lot of people realize. But beautiful matchup. You have favorable draws against the Vikings, who I think are going to struggle a little bit. The Giants, the Broncos, they're just set up for a big year. So obviously a good thing there. But the second team, and I know I did mention this as well before, but I want to talk a little bit more in depth here, is the Detroit Lions. So I talked about Kenny Golladay last week on the pod. I believe that was on Friday. But I didn't talk about Marvin Jones. And an interesting topic came up today in the PFF Elite Facebook group, the fantasy group. Somebody had asked about projections and said, that some of them don't look right. Marvin Jones is projecting in PPR as the number 16 wide receiver, and it just doesn't look right. And I get it. On the surface, hey, I'm not ranking him anywhere near. I don't even have him ranked inside the top 24. He's a wide receiver 3. That's what he is. But part of the challenge with projections is realizing what they actually are. I think it's very easy to look at projections and simply assume that's what's going to happen. People do this all the time in season. They'll go to like ESPN and be like, I'm projected to win. It's like, yes, on average you are, but that doesn't mean that's not really what the projections mean. I mean, if we ran that game out 100 times, how many times do you win? The projection's not saying you're winning 100% of the time. It's probably closer, 55 maybe to 60% of the time. It's never really that vast. It's, even with a big gap in projections, it's not like the numbers would suggest you're going to win like 90% of the time. You would have to have an enormous gap for that to be the case. But regardless, with projections, what are they saying? They're saying the averages, and they're not showing you the potential range of outcomes. Now, with Marvin Jones, it's a really interesting case because there's a couple things that are baked into the numbers and are a great explanation as to why he projects out so favorably. First and foremost, did you realize that over the last 3 seasons, on a fantasy points per game basis, Marvin Jones ranks 18th in the league? So basically almost right where he's projecting. 18th fantasy points per game among wide receivers. Pretty impressive. The Detroit Lions offensively took a step forward in the passing game last year. Matty Stafford looked like his old self. That bodes well. And they also get the number 2 schedule for wide receivers. There are 3 things that are kind of juicing Marvin Jones's numbers up. Now, the reason why I always say projections first, rankings second, and rankings final is because you can now factor some things in. And I mean, to be fair, part of the reason with Marvin Jones that he, gets this bum rap is he's not always been the picture of health, right? He's missed some time over the course of his career. So I could bake that into projections. And let's say okay, well, I'm going to project him to play 14 games. Now, yeah, he moves down probably right into the range where I'm willing to rank him. I don't have that in projections right now. I don't like to put myself in the position to predict injuries, at least with projections. But when it comes to rankings, I'm more willing to move subjectively a player down if I think that, there's a greater chance for injury. Part of my process, whether you agree or disagree with it, I'm pulling the curtain back and letting you know where I am. So you can move him down based on that. You can move him down if you think he's going to be closer to his floor than his ceiling. When we went through every single team in the initial projections, there were a number of instances where I told you flat out, I say, hey, I disagree with this number, or I think this number's too high, and I think the player's going to be closer to his floor. Or the other way around. I think he's going to be closer to his ceiling. I disagree with the number, and I move him up. So I think that's important to note. But the big takeaway here, Marvin Jones, pretty favorable schedule, except down the stretch. Their playoff schedule is bad. 26th in the fantasy playoffs. Packers, Titans, Bucks, 14, 15, 16. Not good matchups. But regardless, something to keep in mind with Marvin Jones. You're going to get him you get Marvin Jones at a value every year. Every stinking year. It's like Russell Wilson. You get Russell Wilson at a value every year. It's crazy. You're going to get Marvin Jones at a value. Don't overvalue him and know what you're going to get with him. You're going to get a guy who any given week could go out and score 4 touchdowns. We've seen it. He could also get hurt. We've seen it. But I'm taking him at a value if I can. Carolina gets the number 3 matchup on the season for wideouts, the number 2 during the fantasy playoffs. A big part of that is facing Washington in Week 16. Washington's the number 1 matchup. So good for DJ Moore. Very good for DJ Moore. I think the bigger question here with DJ Moore isn't the schedule. It's Teddy Bridgewater and then Joe Brady. And I don't have, I'm not saying I question Joe Brady. It's more like, what is Joe Brady going to be in the NFL? We know what he was last year. It was pretty darn good. Historically good. But what is he going to be like, calling the shots as an offensive coordinator in the NFL. Going to be interesting. And then what about Teddy? We've seen moments, flashes out of Teddy, but generally, I mean, hey, Teddy from a football standpoint for fantasy purposes is the ultimate definition of meh. That's pretty much what he's been. I'm not saying he can't be more, but 2 question marks. Let's just leave it at that. Number 4 goes to the Chargers, but the Chargers get the number 1 matchup in the fantasy playoffs. And I think that's important because, so you look at it for Keenan Allen and Mike Williams to a lesser extent. Coming out of the gate, I do think Tyrod Taylor's under center. I don't think it lasts much longer than week 5. I mean, hey, 4.5. If you say 3.5, probably 3.5 is the line. 3.5 is the line. I don't think it'll last much longer than week 5, but I really think we see Herbert under center by week 4. And I really think, a big part of that especially will be if they get out, if the Chargers lose in week 1, if they lose in week 2, especially then, the fans are going to be clamoring. Everybody's going to be clamoring for that. And so will they lose in week 1? I mean, they face the Bengals, so you'd have to figure the Chargers are going to be a favorite there. Will they lose in week 2? They play the Chiefs. So then they get the Panthers, then the Bucks. Oh, man, if Herbert starts in week 5, it's against New Orleans. Interesting. Anyway, point of this rambling rant here is Tyrod Taylor under center, not really that stoked about Keenan Allen. Certainly not stoked about Mike Williams. Herbert under center, I'm now intrigued, especially by Mike Williams. Just throw the ball downfield. Let kid go get it. Very interesting. And in the fantasy playoffs, here's the Chargers schedule. They get the Falcons, the Raiders, and the Broncos. Remember the Broncos secondary was awesome. Well, it is not on paper right now. That's the number 2, 3, and 4 matchups. Pretty good. Pretty good. Green Bay gets number 5. So, yeah, plenty of Devontae Adams. So, basically, I'll just say Devontae Adams gets the number 5 because who cares about everybody else? New Orleans gets the number 6. So, giddy up, Michael Thomas. Chicago, the number 7, and they also are the number 8 during the fantasy playoffs. Anthony Miller saying that, this is going to be his best season yet. I'm buying in on that. I found myself, the only challenge with Anthony Miller for me is if I'm in a draft where I've already taken Allen Robinson, and it's not that I don't subscribe to the, you shouldn't draft 2 wideouts from the same team. No, I don't really subscribe to that. Like, I would draft Mike Evans and Chris Godwin on the same team. If I had that opportunity, I would do it, potentially. I'm not going to shy away from that one. But with these guys, Chicago offense, I mean, even if it's Foles under center, we can't be that optimistic. So I don't know if I want to put 2 eggs in that basket. However, if I don't draft Allen Robinson, who I'm continuing to get at a value, I don't know what they're thinking. He put those numbers up last year with Mitch Trubisky under center. Regardless, if I don't, and Anthony Miller's there at a value, giddy up. He was so good down the stretch. The stupid shoulder injury at the end of the season is annoying, but I'm buying in. Super talented and continues to improve. So good stuff there. Let's give you 2 more here after Chicago. Actually, I give you 3 more to get you to 10. Dallas at 8. So all those receivers get the number 8 schedule. Minnesota at 9. Adam Thielen. And then Pittsburgh at 10. I like that. Deante Johnson. Somebody asked me, hey, what is it with him? Why do people love him so much? Watch him play last year. You go back and, really, if you have the opportunity now and you have access to the games, go back and watch the Steelers games and just watch Deante Johnson. Very talented. From a route running standpoint, super polished for a rookie. Explosive. Has a lot of similarities with an early career Antonio Brown, and we started to see the player who we come to know as AB. And again, we're not going to talk about the off-field stuff, but the player we came to know as AB really emerging in his second year. Now, does Johnson take that step forward? hey, we don't know. And I think if we did know, he'd be going a lot earlier than the 9th and 10th rounds of 12-team leagues. But schedule won't hurt the cause there. You'll have to face the Ravens, sure. The Browns secondary pretty good too, but there are some really nice matchups in there as well for the Steelers. On the other end of the spectrum, we'll give you the bottom 10 here, so we'll start at 23. The Houston Texans, obviously a lot of mouths to feed here. You have Cooks, you have Fuller, you have Cobb, you have Stills. So that's the bigger concern. Denver, 24. I like that group. It'll be interesting to see what happens here in terms of how Judy, how much he takes off of Sutton's plate. Does Drew Lock take a step forward? But the schedule is tricky. You have some nice matchups in there for Denver, but they do get off. This start is relatively tricky for the wideouts. You get Pittsburgh and you have Tennessee. Okay, that's not terrible, but it's not great. Then Pittsburgh, then Tampa, then the Jets. Reasonably tough with the Jets. Then the Patriots through the first 5 weeks of the season. Now, fortunately, after that, you get Miami. But that's not the best set of matchups there. Not the best. Anyway, Washington, number 25. Doesn't help the cause here for these Redskins wideouts. If I can get Terry McLaurin at a value, I'll take him all day long, though, because one of the things is if you have crazy upside, can take it to the house on any given play. That helps negate any matchup concerns for me because you're not investing in a high volume guy. You're investing in a high upside guy. The Rams, though, coming in at 25, the number 29 schedule during the playoffs. So let's talk a little bit about Cooper Kupp and one Bob Woods. This is tricky because, well, here's my experience in drafts so far. Kupp goes too early. Woods goes a little bit too late. So, you're getting a better value on Woods than you are on Kupp. But we're also obviously very intimately tied to what we think about Jared Goff here. And it's fascinating that people will take these guys early. They'll take Tyler Higbee potentially early, and then they won't touch Goff even in the late rounds potentially. So that does say something. But beyond that, I mean, hey, Goff's put up decent yardage over the last 2 years, but last year especially struggled from a touchdown standpoint. That's my one concern when you have to face the 49ers twice, when you have to face the Patriots this season. It's going to be tricky. That just in general, the matchups aren't good for these NFC West teams. Anyway, back to the chart. So after that, the Patriots, the aforementioned Patriots, they have the number 26 scheduled for wideouts, number 32 during the fantasy playoffs, and that's without playing themselves. So that is saying something there. But really, what do we like? I don't like anything. I don't like Julian Edelman, and I love what he's done over his career, but he's too old and he has no quarterback. N'Keal Harry, no thanks. Mo Sanu, no thanks. What do we like there? We don't like anything, so it doesn't matter. Cincinnati at 28 and the number 27 playoff schedule. It's going to be a tough one for A.J. Green and Tyler Boyd, but I don't mind Tyler Boyd that much because you're not really paying, you're not overpaying for him, but I do think people are still overpaying for A.J. Green. And they're doing so because of the name value, the name brand recognition of A.J. Green. I'll keep saying this till I'm blue in the face. He's going to be 32 this season. He has missed 29 games over the last 4 years, and now he also has a very bad schedule. So 2 + 2 + 2 = 6. Anyway, the Jets at 29, number 31 schedule during the playoffs. I mean, beyond this, I think the bigger concern is, okay, you have Jamison Crowder. We know what he is. He's a low upside slot receiver. We have Brashad Perryman, who, yes, showed big time upside last year, but has basically done that in 5 games over the course of his entire 4-year NFL career. And then Denzel Mims, I want to believe in him, but he's a rookie, and it's going to take some time maybe with Denzel Mims. So I don't know if I'm going to have any, unless the value is just crazy on Crowder, probably won't have many shares of Jets receivers at all. I don't know if I have any outside of maybe a couple best ball lineups with Crowder right now. The Dolphins at 30. I do think the Devontae Parker love may be going a little too far because people are overlooking Preston Williams, and the schedule won't do him any favors. As you can see here, if you're in the AFC East, your schedule is going to be tough for wideouts. Arizona comes in as the second worst schedule. Hey, you play in the NFC West. It's going to be tough. But you know what? For DeAndre Hopkins, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whatsoever for DeAndre Hopkins. It doesn't really faze me. Maybe for Christian Kirk a little, but I'm not really targeting him too heavily because I do think a lot of the targets shift towards DeAndre Hopkins. He is an official target monster. So the worst schedule. Are we sensing a theme here? Goes to the Buffalo Bills. I'm sorry. Bills fans, this is not a shot at you, I swear. It's just the way the numbers work out. I just said it. If you are in the AFC East, you have a very tough schedule. And when you look at it, so let's see. The Patriots are at 26. The Jets are at 29. The Dolphins are at 30. The Bills are at 32. They play very similar schedules. And at least the Bills don't have to play themselves, but their schedule is really rough. And, I mean, here, think about this. From down the stretch, they're facing weeks 12 to 14 outside of the Patriots, outside of their division. They're facing the Chargers, 49ers, and Steelers in consecutive weeks. Rough. This is something we need to consider. I know there's a lot of love for Stephon Diggs, but we need to consider that, no doubt about it, and not overvalue Stephon Diggs or John Brown. Not that I don't think people are overvaluing him, but something to consider there. If you want this whole chart, you know what I'm going to say right now. You got to go to pff.com to check it out. And, of course, you can check me out on social media at Jeff Ratcliffe on Twitter and Instagram. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow. We have quarterback strength of schedule in the hopper for tomorrow. So will the Bills be last again? I'll tell you tomorrow, all right? Catch you on the flip side for another edition of the pod for PFF and Jeff Ratcliffe, and I'm out of here.